Welcome back to Between Two Racks with the Kilo Crew. On today's episode, we're going to talk developing strength in the primary movements, what we like to refer to as the primate. So, let's kick it. So, do we have a specific primary movement that we'd like to begin with?
We should probably start with lower body.
Okay, lower body, so squat.
Let's do squat. So for squat, and when we say squat, we mean back squat. We'll always say if it's front squat, so squat is back squat.
And I think it's important to clarify what we refer to as the back squat.
Okay, so Olympic style back squat, it's not as much that we need a high bar position. That's going to be very relative to torso length and femur length and all that. But what we're trying to do is maintain as upright a position as possible, full range of motion, knees tracking over your toes, not trying to sit back with vertical shin angle. So an Olympic style back squat.
Okay.
So for driving up the back squat, there's lots of ways to do it, but one way I've had really good success with myself and any clients who got strong enough to have the ability to do it is get people stronger at triple jump or step up.
Whoop,
So,
whoop.
yeah.
My favorite.
So for context, triple jump or step up is you raise the platform height to the point that your hamstring is covering your calf on the working leg and you're up on the back toe of the the support leg. So there's zero ability to push off the back leg. So you're pretty much doing a full range of motion, single leg squat, but it's referred to as a triple jump or step up. So the stability and strength gained from there I've always found a huge correlation to crossover to back squat. So that is my go-to if someone's got the mobility and strength to get there.
Yeah, because I think it's important to note that not everyone can do a triple jump or step up.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
And most people can't do it well. So it has to be performed very well to have the carryover. But if they can, it's great. And it's even one of the reasons I really love it is it's not an awful lot of additional load, which if people know if they're in a squat macro cycle, there's a lot of bilateral axial loading. So having an exercise to drive that squat number up without much additional load is really, really useful.
Yeah.
Along with that, just to prove the efficiency of the triple jumper for the back squat, let's just look at you. So like in one of the previous podcasts, like Porik was joking that you have had like triple jumper in every phase. Well, it's true. Like for an entire 12-week macro cycle, every meso, you had a triple jumper variation. And the variation had more to do with the way we loaded the implements. So like it was a progressive loading component. But what's interesting with you, if we look at strength ratios, you actually have the ideal strength ratio of triple jumper to back squat. But it's interesting too because you do have a very potent back squat for your size, but also like technique wise, like Kelsey's like the perfect example of a like ass to grass, feet flat, upright torso, hamstring covering the calves, knees in front of the toes, solid torso position. You're really good at keeping torso angle constant through the initial push off of the bottom. So you're like, like your positioning is very solid.
And it was years of doing the squat at 40x0. I just got faster tempos this year. So just saying, like, obviously it was also building it up.
Because how many reps did you perform with like a barbell on your back?
With triple jumper? 4, Alex, right? When you filmed me? Yeah, 4.
With the 45-pound bar.
Yeah, no, exactly. So that puts her right into that like proper strength ratio of triple jumper to, but like.
What's the ratio? Do you have a specific one?
Yeah, it's about 30% of your back squat. But no, she's a little short, but she's very, very close to it. And that's the thing. Like it's a ratio that at first glance seems almost impossible to get to.
Yeah.
but it only seems impossible because nobody ever trains that movement.
that's what I was gonna say.
Or if they do, they try it once and they suck at it and then they never do it again. They're like, oh, it's not possible. Well, it is possible, but you need to train for it. You need to progress it. You start with the arms in front, then, dumbbell in front of the chest, dumbbell to the side.
And that was
barbell in
actually
front.
fun when we played around with it, because I remember you, Alex, I was doing them and I was loading, I forget if it was loading it in front or the back, and then we had this whole discussion in the gym where we went through and Porik and I were trying the different variations to figure out what we wanted the loading to be in terms of variations and progressions.
So like you, if my math is correct in my head, it puts you like at a 27-ish strength ratio based on your back squat right now.
Yeah.
So it's pretty good.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, just for the viewers, keep in mind that the triple jumper, because of the positioning of the movement, like a typical tempo for it, like the what's the term I'm looking for? The default tempo would be a 1-0-1-0.
Yeah. Even though it's a little bit longer just because it's such a long range of
down.
motion, but there's no like...
Yes, but the only reason why I'm saying this is because the triple jumper, it's easy to lean forward
and
excessively.
shoot it. Yeah.
And by leaning forward, it allows you to control the tempo a little bit more. But because we're using this movement to help with the squat, in the bottom, you're going to have a slightly more leaning forward. It's kind of normal, but as the femur gets past parallel, then the torso should go back to perpendicular to the floor, which is basically what happens in a back squat as well. So because of the positioning of the body, if you're able to have a fully controlled eccentric, it means you're leaning forward too much. And if you're leaning forward too much and you're able to control the eccentric, the carryover of that lift to helping your back squat won't be as big.
Yeah.
Then one cue I like when we're on the triple jumper is to try and fix that issue is for people in the bottom position to think of they're nearly doing a leg curl. So in the bottom position, you're trying to use your knee flexors to really tighten the gap between your calf and hamstrings. And that there I've found has helped like preload the glutes and hamstrings to allow for a more upright torso during the execution.
And what's so good about a triple jumper is because the thing about a back squat is the back squat, you're starting standing up. So the first contraction is eccentric. So now you're able to use some elastic energy from the kinetic enhancement of the eccentric contraction to help with the concentric. But what's really cool about the triple jumper is the first movement is concentric. So you're going right up from nothing, but from the bottom position. Like in the bottom of a triple jumper, your hamstring is covering the calf completely, and the knee is in front of the toes. So you have no choice but to fire everything from that bottom position.
So would you say as a progression for someone who's doing it for the first time, maybe you have them start on top of the triple jumper and then they can go down so they get they get a little elastic energy help in the bottom position?
Not as much, just because since you have to go down, you have to reset each rep. It's not like you ever get a true expression of elastic
remember
energy.
when you did it, we tried it from the top,
When
and
I
there
was
was a
doing
big
alternating,
difference.
Yeah, she
There's
was
a big
doing.
difference.
She was doing the alternating. No, you're right to that account, but the only reason why I'm saying I would Porik is right with the setup, but you're right, because when you did the alternated like this, it did affect it. But the only reason why I would hesitate a little bit with the full blown beginner on that movement is
not a beginner.
No, a beginner on that movement.
Okay.
Like somebody who's doing that movement for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just that I would be worried that starting on top, you're not having the proper grooving of the movement and you're kind of losing on that learning curve. So to me, if you're unable to do a triple jumper, just keep progressing your standard front step up and get really, really strong in the front step up. And if you're really strong in the front step up and you keep on squatting, that's the key thing too.
Yeah.
Right? It's like it's not like we're saying do not squat.
No, I was squatting every single.
Yeah, you've been squatting at least once a week or twice a week a lot of the time for a very long time. But that's the thing. So you're always squatting. So although you're doing your typical front step up and getting strong in the front step up, it's not like that bottom range is not trained. And let's not also forget that we also do split squat or lunges variations to help with that bottom to mid-range position.
So for someone who can't do the triple jumper, then the progression or the regression would be definitely the split squats, right? To really work that bottom range of your squat to improve that?
No, it would be a regular front step up.
But then you're not really getting that bottom range so much.
I know, but that's why you're doing the front step up alongside split squat. Because if you only do split squat as a precursor to front step up, then you're losing that transition from midpoint up, which you get because the triple jumper, you get the bottom to mid, but you get the mid to top as well. Whereas the split squat, you're getting the bottom to mid, but the mid to top, it's minuscule unless you're using a pulley, but even then it's not like crazy. So in my opinion, if you cannot do a triple jumper step up, you need to combine both split squat and step up variations, like from side to front.
Which is how we program, right? In the B series.
Yeah. But I see your point with the bottom position, but you if you only do split squat and then you step onto a triple jumper, nothing's going to happen because you've never trained that transition point towards the top.
And you've never trained the ability to stabilize the hip through space. Because no matter what, in the split squat, you're still going to have a staggered stance. Yeah. So once you go to truly unilateral, that you're pressing up, and once that bottom foot's off the ground, the hip has to stabilize everything.
Yeah. Like at least the lunge would be a little bit better of a bridge for that because of the momentary period you're spending on one limb. But even then, it's just not the same stress at all.
Okay, before this episode turns into a triple jumper episode, let's move on to another exercise to develop or technique to develop strength in the squat.
Well, the exercise I'm going to name now it's like a jack of all trade. I just find it's like a great exercise for almost every lower body primary, not as much the front squat, but definitely the squat and deadlift. In my opinion, what I always strive to do early on with someone is to drive their good mornings as high as possible. That to me, like if you're able to have a really strong standing good morning, this should or will help with your back squat.
I thought it was really cool recently when you were looking through all of the Kilo clients on the roster that we have right now. Like everyone, that you're confident in how you've seen them train. You know they train really well. They've been following our programming for a long period of time. And then you guys were analyzing it was the standing good morning ratios or the seated good morning. Which one were you looking at?
Seated.
I looked at both.
And then it was that everyone had really good, if not higher than strength ratios.
Yeah, but like all of them had really because I was looking at data in preparation for the sports camp. So I was mostly looking at the seated good morning because that's one of our standards. But all of these guys that I looked into, because I knew how they train and I could really trust their technique, they all had really good seated good morning. But what's really interesting is the two biggest scores on a relative strength perspective of everybody was you and Porig, and both of you train here all the time. And you spend decent amount on those. Like you guys' strength ratio were significantly higher, but both of you have really good squat. Both of you never have any type of low back pain. I don't think I've ever heard any of you complain about low back.
Well, a little, but it's more because I'm pretty sure I have a bulged disc from years ago.
Oh, okay.
I just refuse to get an MRI to know.
I thought it was more like you had a sciatica.
Yeah, but I think it's because of that.
Oh, okay. But anyway, so
I would have a really good ratio if I squatted.
Yeah, but that's true, right? Because your good morning is great. It's
decent.
strong. Your range is there, but it's just in the squat, your knees bother you too much to really drive that.
But I just feel like a lot of people, and I'm not talking about the elite, I'm talking about like general population and even team sports athletes that are not elite in the weight room. A lot of them, their main weakness, in my opinion, and their ability to drive weight on the back squat is like that whole like core area, like the combination of abdominal strength and lower back strength. So like whatever is connecting the upper to the lower body, I think is the biggest limiting factor. So when you're able to be strong on a good morning, where now, and it's like the most stressful lower back exercise because of the stress on the spine and the long lever arm from the hip all the way down to the barbell on your back. So it's a lot of resiliency that you need to build to maintain a neutral spine with the stress of that load.
So I know we have the standard of what we view as the perfect seated good morning, like being, isn't it? It's basically like the ribs
To the adductors, to the inside of
the lower ribs to the adductors, but ideally like chest on the bench.
Okay, so then let's kind of do what we did with the triple jumper for people who can't reach that range of motion in our standard. What do you have them train for the good morning to get better at that, to get towards the standard?
Okay, so, well, I just want to clarify, like the exercise I was talking about as my main one is the standing good morning.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the seated good morning, if you don't have the range of motion standard, what I like to do is start with the hips higher, but lower than a standing good morning. So, like, let's say 135 degree of knee angle. So you elevate the hips off of the bench, and then you go down, but you want to make sure that you're choosing a height that allows your torso in the bottom position to be parallel to the ground. So if 110 degrees of knee angle allows you to be parallel to the ground, start at 110 degrees. So you start at whatever angle you can that allows you to be parallel to the ground with the torso, and then you slightly progress by lowering the hips until you reach the point, which is the standard, where the knee angle is 90 degrees. So my favorite tool for this is to use a decline bench, because the decline bench, you can sit a little higher up, and then depending on your rate of progress, either from phase to phase or workout to workout, you slightly lower your hips like half an inch or 1 inch at a time on that decline bench until you're closing down the angle from 135 to 110 to 90 degrees. And then, I mean, it's very progressive, but it works well because it's like no fluff, and it's just like progressive overload in terms of range of motion.
So standing good morning, I don't know if this is a silly question, but in terms, is the standing or seated harder for people to reach the full range of motion?
Seated.
Like the
Seated by far.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you have them work on the seated first, or do you tend to work on the standing more? Or is it client dependent?
Depends who we're training. If we're training athletes, we'll start with the seated. If we're training Gen Pop, if they have the range, there's no problem with the seated. If they don't, you could start with the standing and then progress.
Other exercises for developing, we'll probably do one more for the squat. Does anyone have another one for the squat?
Well, a really, really simple one that people overlook all the time is like a pin touch mid-range. So pin touch mid-range squat, so you can use more than your actual RM. So it'll be your first exposure to these heavier loads. So it's really good for the central nervous system. really good for bracing ability. It's really good just for nearly even building confidence with heavier loads.
Personally, I like it because you feel the weight on your back.
Yeah, so it's great. It is great. It's more of a, you see a nail, you hit it with a hammer approach than the other two, but it definitely works.
And I think a lot of people tend to mess it up because the pin touch, you're unracking from the rack like you normally would and then going down and touching the pins and going back up versus it's the dead stop where you're starting on the pins.
And both are great. Okay. Both are great. Because you still, if it's a mid-range, you still should be able to use more than your RM without a doubt. Yeah. So, it definitely works. It just, if you're in a squat macro cycle, you have to be careful because if you're already squatting twice a week and then you're adding this in as a third squat variation, it's a lot of axial loading. So the client has to be ready for it and be able to tolerate it.
Okay.
Before we keep on going, I just want to add a little something to the pin touch, just for people to fully understand the terms here, because you see a million terms everywhere. So of course we need to explain a little bit. So pin touch, it's a partial, but you're using the safety pin as a range of motion guide. But it's a good repeated effort method in the sense that you can drive reps and volume in a partial range, and you're using the safety pins just as a guide for range. So you touch the pins, but you're not resting on the pins. You're just touching, go back up, touch, go back up. Whereas the dead stop or inertia, where you're starting from the pins, now it's more of a true maximal strength exercise because now you're eliminating some, if not all, of the elastic energy, and it's a true expression of concentric strength. So it's more demanding, a little harder. So you're not necessarily going to do these for like higher reps, whereas pin touch, you can do them for a wide range of repetitions.
Okay, so that was the squat. I mean, we need to move along in exercises. So do we want to go to front squat?
Yeah.
Okay, front squat. So, Steph?
Front squat, actually, like there's a few I like, but one that might sound like, what? Horizontal back extension.
Yeah.
Like loaded, like with a front barbell. So obviously you want a horizontal back extension that's high enough for you to be able to use a front barbell. But why do I like so I like the horizontal extension, back extension with the front barbell for two reasons for the front squat. One, the front squat, you're trying to stay as upright as possible throughout because the mechanics of the movement allows you to stay more upright. But to be able to facilitate staying upright, you want to be strong in the hip extensors in the top range because that's the position that's required for the front squat. So the horizontal back extension overloads the top range, which is great for the purpose of the front squat. Why do I say front barbell? It's because the front squat requires a lot of strength in the upper back, the mid back, as a stabilizer to maintain the front rack position. So if you're using a front barbell for your back extension and you use a wide grip, then you're truly firing on top of the hip extensors. You're firing that mid back. The scaps are retracted and everything. So not only are you overloading hip extensors, but you're strengthening isometrically the mid back, which is what's required for the front rack position. To maintain the front rack position, you need good upper back isometric strength. So to me, it's like a double whammy movement.
One I really like for the front squat is cyclist squat, but with a safety bar. So similar logic to Steph in terms of the safety bar is going to increase demands of the upper back, but you're not dealing with a front rack position. So it allows you to do a little more time under tension. And then the cyclist squat, so since your heels are going to be elevated 30 degrees and feet 4 to 6 inches apart pointing forward, it's really demanding on the quads, which is the main muscle that's going to drive your front squat numbers. So it's just a really good compound movement to drive up your front squat numbers without overtaxing that front rack position.
Yeah, because I think it's important for everyone that's listening that hasn't necessarily gone through our education is when we're saying these exercises, we're not removing the primary movements from the programs. The squat's still there, the front squat's still there, so you're still getting practice in on the movements. These are just what we're using in the work in the rest of the session to drive up the numbers. So horizontal back extension loaded, cyclist safety bar.
Would you say the Zercher squat is a good one to work the upper back and build the strength on the
Definitely.
front rack position?
Yeah.
I know I did that, and I was like, wow, I feel that more in my upper back than...
To me, the Zercher squat's really good. It will build upper back, but if someone really struggles with core stability in the front squat, the Zercher squat would be a better choice. Like, everything's good choices. It's just where the person's specific weakness is. So if someone like constantly breaks at the torso and falls, like crunches forward, then the Zercher squat's fantastic.
Yeah. Then there's another one that kind of like with the back extensions, people are going to be like, really? But heavy loaded, I'm going to bring back a term from the 80s, sit-ups.
Oh, yeah.
Because like, let's never forget that the body works in harmony. So if I really want to drive hip extension, especially at top range, I also want to make sure that the abdominal wall will also improve in strength. So we have this really, really, really stable structure to stay upright in that front squat. So in my opinion, if you're getting strong at heavy sit-up, where now it really is a flexion abdominal exercise, but where the torso is moving towards the legs. So you're loading your sit-up, but you're making sure that as you're doing it, you're maintaining more of that neutral spine on top of it. I think it marries very well with the strength development of the horizontal back extension. So it just makes for that sturdier, strong core on that front squat.
So sorry, you're differentiating. This is a sit up over a crunch.
Yeah. So crunch, you're flexing the entire spine.
Yep.
Whereas the sit up, you're trying to keep the spine neutral, kind of like the Yanda sit up.
I was gonna say.
You're keeping the spine neutral, and so you're having that rectus abdominis isometric contraction, but you're basically driving with a little bit more hip flexors. Yep. To kind of match the hip extensors. Yep. And then you load it. You can load it with like a dumbbell or a barbell, but it's kind of old school, but
it works.
It works, and it's one of those things because you know how like sit-ups kind of got a bad rap like 15 years ago or so when all the functional training started to come out.
Yep.
But it is something that I used a lot on myself in my early days when my squat was way more aggressive than it is now. And I also used it a lot with some of my more advanced clients, and I always thought it worked really well. But it's like I'm bringing more of these back. Like I kind of like abs for a while. I kind of lost a little bit of
enthusiasm.
No, not enthusiasm, but not creativity. But I kept reverting to that same old thing all the time.
Well, it's just training the hip flexors was so vilified for years.
Yeah.
Whereas now everyone's like...
Now everyone's back on board.
Yeah, they're coming back to realizing, no, they actually serve a very important function.
Yeah, which is, it just makes sense because everything works as an agonist, antagonist. So if you're driving a muscle but don't pay attention to the antagonist, you're looking for trouble.
100%.
I mean, this whole episode is exercises for developing strength. I think across the board in all primary exercises, if you develop ab strength, you will get stronger in all of the primary movements.
Yeah, I mean, it's for strength, but let's be honest. It's not like you're not going to build muscle mass with the primary movement.
Yeah.
Well, to add on to your crunch, I would add on like any breathing. Any breathing ab exercise, like the
100%. Yeah.
So where you're stabilizing, pulling the ribs down, and then being able to breathe through it as you're activating your abs.
Yep.
Well, you know, like the low ab drill progression
exactly.
that you like in conjunction with the breathing pattern.
That would be an awesome.
That to me would be a good prequel to all of this because if you don't nail that, then I just don't think you're going to reap the full benefits of those heavy loaded ab exercises.
Yeah.
I agree.
Train your abs.
Train them.
And your low back.
Yeah.
And your hip flexors.
Train it all. Okay, so squat, front squat. Moving on to the deadlift. Everybody's favorite.
All right, so Steph stole my favorite with the good morning, but I'll go to a very, very, very close second, which would be a 2-inch deficit deadlift. So obviously you can do more than 2 inches. I've always found 2 inches to have the best carryover because it's slightly closer to the actual movement pattern. You don't have to change the dynamics as much. You don't get as much quad drive as a 4-inch, and it allows for a heavier load. So if people struggle with maintaining a neutral spine due to load, going to 4 inches while it'll work more of a range of motion, it'll reduce the load to the extent that they don't get better at the bracing ability and challenge their ability to maintain a neutral spine. So I really like a 2-inch deficit. Mostly mid-grip deadlift, wide grip if someone's really strong upper back, and that's not going to affect the load too much.
Okay, that's a good one. Deficits are always like, woof, when you see them, but they're they're fun.
I have two favorite. I have a assistance favorite and I have a remedial favorite. The remedial favorite is, it mirrors a little bit the front squat, but again, it works like crazy. A incline back extension with a front barbell.
Yep.
Why? Because it mimics the torso to femur angle that's required to be really strong and stable in the initial pull of a deadlift. And the front loaded, well, then you're like, it's basically a deadlift again, right? So you're holding a barbell at arm's length. You need to have a strong upper back. You need to maintain a stable neutral spine. You need to maintain scapular positioning with the heavy load of the barbell. So I really like that one for it. And I also, like, if I'm doing it specifically for the deadlift, I'm actually going to have a longer, I'll jack up the incline of I'll use like a 40 to 50 degree incline, and I'll use a slower eccentric contraction.
Yep.
And then my favorite assistance for the deadlift is a below knee. It's more of a technique than an exercise, but it's a below knee functional isometric deadlift. Why I like that one is, like most of the time where I see people struggling, it's the initial pull from the floor from 8 inches to the knees. So what I like about the functional isometric is you're starting from the floor and then you're pulling to the top pins right below the knee, whereas now that transition spot where like the knees are going to be pushing back and the torso will start to extend. So but what happens is you're spending a ton of time in that bottom position up to the below the knee. So the functional isometric, you're starting from the bottom. I do like to use load. You don't need load, but I do like to use load, especially to work the grooving of the 8-inch to below the knee. So then you start from the floor, pull into the pins that's right below the knee, hold it for 6 to 8 seconds, so build up intramuscular tension, come back down, reset, pull again, and you do this for anywhere from 4 to 6 reps with a 6 to 8 second isometric pause. Really like that one. I feel that it carries over really, really well. So when you come back to your conventional deadlift, you're going to see right away an improvement in positioning in that initial pull.
The only issue with that exercise, while it is great, is people are very often break technique to continue their pull. So if you do prescribe it, you have to be very on it coaching-wise to maintain the right mechanics, because everyone will go into a rounded upper back position very, very quickly. And that's if you're lucky, because it could just be a completely rounded torso. Yeah. So, yeah.
Those techniques I always find, like the functional isos, people tend to get sloppy
very
with
quickly.
them, but it's like even, not that it's always important, but in those it's like really focusing on maintaining.
Yeah, so you have to remember that we're able to build more tension doing these overcoming isometrics than we can in any concentric action. So if you're going to be willing to have that level of tension, you better have good positioning.
Yeah.
Like Sale, S-A-L-E, back in the days in his research, he showed that it takes 3 to 4 seconds at least to build up to maximal isometric tension. But once you reach isometric tension, it's not possible to keep a maximal isometric tension for more than 1 second. Yeah. So that's why I'm saying why I like 6 to 8 is you build it up. So you pull into the pins, and now you slowly build up. And
that's why people have to pull slow. We see a lot of students, and they try to come up real fast, and then they're like bouncing off the pin.
I don't get that.
So
like they
slow, and then build
your
that
pull.
tension.
Yeah.
People are going too fast on the functional ISO.
Yeah.
But the isometronic, that's the one that it gets ridiculous. Yeah, it's all over the place. That speed has nothing to do with what we're doing with isometronics. It's not a speed event. It's an isometric event. So you're doing a few partial repetitions under control. It's a 1-0-1-0 tempo because the range is short as hell. Yeah. But it's not a speed event. Yeah. So I like those. And then obviously that's a complete side, and that's just me because I like to do, it's how I was brought up with Andre and Charles and all these guys. I'm a huge fan of deadlifting with a pronated grip, no mixed grip. I like the no straps just because I like grip stuff. But to me, I like to combine grip training, any type of grip training. It doesn't just have to be heavy holds. It can be anything. Don't forget to work on finger extension and forearm extension as well, again, to make sure everything is balanced. Because if all you ever do is grip, flexion, you're creating some type of an imbalance. But do this, and it's going to help a ton in your ability to deadlift with a pronated grip. It's just that the mixed grip, if you deadlift a lot, over time, it can. I'm not saying it absolutely does, but it can lead to certain imbalances. But what thing it can do if you're really strong is increase the likelihood of bicep tears.
I mean, at least if you're going to do the mixed grips, switch grips all the time. I don't know if people do that, but
yeah,
like one time do it this way, the other time do it that way. Like, so at least you're somewhat balanced. But
you're right. But
you're
at the same time, me, it's more of a ideological fight that I'm having with this. It's like, why are you training in the first place? Yeah. Are you like, is the purpose of you training to showcase your strength every session to everybody in the gym, or are you training to get stronger so one day you can showcase your strength? So if you're training to get stronger, why not try to to do it in the most balance, injury less potential fashion as possible with
and there's
proper
another
technique.
Yeah, just use straps. Yeah. Like I don't understand the mixed grip.
You can. Well, mixed grips would be for a powerlifter where it's not allowed in competition. Yeah, that's a different story. That's the sport of powerlifting. But if you're training to train or you're training an athlete, the football player does not need to deadlift on the field. Yeah. He needs to have a strong posterior chain. And a strong grip. So train.
Well, didn't you always say you have to earn, we have to earn the right to use the straps. So at least your first few sets, don't use the straps. Once your grip fails, then you can use the straps. But I think with your players, you always said you have to get to 300 pounds before they could use straps.
I mean, it comes from Charles Poliquin, right? Like Charles always had those like funny little rules, like, for example, whenever you...
No tank tops.
That's what I was going to say. If you went to train in one of his gym and you're a male, you were not allowed to wear sleeveless or tank tops unless you had at least 18-inch arm diameter.
He is like turning around and around in his grave right now because there's a lot of tank tops with small arms.
but he also taught me the same thing with deadlift. Like him, in his opinion, if you're training an athlete... he was way more blunt. Like I remember him telling me like straight up, if you're unable to deadlift 315 without straps, you don't deserve to live. All he's saying is as a male athlete, you should have the grip strength to deadlift 315 without straps. So to me, what I've always done with my athletes is if they deadlifted less than 315, I did not allow straps, and I didn't care. I accepted that the grip was the limiting factor on their deadlift development, but it motivated them to hold on tight. Now, once they got over 315, then I allowed the straps if they needed it. But the one thing about the straps is if you're doing any type of deadlift variation that's more than 6 repetitions, like heavy RDLs for reps or stuff like that, then of course use the strap because the strength endurance of the forearms and grip is the limiting factor. But for like,
or isometrics,
like if you're doing sets of 4 and a deadlift with less than 315, come on, like just that to me is a telltale sign that maybe you need to spend some time working on your grip.
Yeah.
Okay. And to me, it's the same thing for any crutch, like the belt and all that kind of stuff. Like if you're training to be a more functional athlete or anything like that, or to be stronger as a general population, why use all the crutches available, like the wristbands and the sleeves and the this and the that? Just like, if you need all of this, it's because you're creating more strain than building up tissue.
So that should be the first exercise. You know how we're saying we're choosing exercises to build strength for those primary like lower bodies? Well, the first thing is don't use a belt. Like
but the grip's a funny thing though, because I guess I've always been naturally strong at the grip personally, but I didn't have straps when I was a kid training. But even in high school, I could deadlift 315 without straps. Like I don't even remember personally when I needed straps to deadlift 315. So I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
One last thing in the deadlift, because we see it all the time, is people don't control their eccentric. So that alone will help drive up your deadlift numbers. And by control your eccentric, we mean the whole way to the ground, not to your knees, then drop.
Pushing it.
So if you expect to be able to pull the bar from the ground under control, you should be able to sit it back down under control. So
yeah. And then I know some people are going to say, but like top level powerlifters don't control. Yes. But they're training for their sport. They have way more deadlifting volume. They're doing technical work. So for them to control the eccentric on every deadlift for a sport in which the event per se does not require you to lower the weight under control anyways, I understand why they don't do
100%.
it. But if you're doing it for hypertrophy or general strength, control the eccentric, because it goes a long way in developing posterior chain strength, because the posterior chain is also a great decelerator, so you want to be able to control it.
Yep.
Okay, so that brings us to the upper body movements. So starting on bench press.
The most simple thing you can do to improve bench press is to do dumbbell press.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's really simple, but like assuming you're strong enough to use bigger dumbbells with a neutral grip, so you can have more range of motion, so you can go in shoulder extension a little deeper, which if you're strengthening the movement pattern at a range of motion lower than what's required with the barbell, you're invariably helping the limiting factor of the bench press, which is the bottom position when the barbell's on your chest.
Yep.
It's kind of like the same idea as the deficit deadlift helping with the deadlift from the floor. Yeah. So that to me is a kind of almost too stupid but really effective way to build up your bench in terms of just a simple exercise. Then to me, I would go more into techniques.
I have a question before we move on to something else, because I don't know why it was. Whenever I started training in high school, or when I started working with a personal trainer, even back then, my first trainer ever, always had me dumbbell press with a neutral grip. My high school strength coach, we had neutral grip dumbbell presses.
That's rare,
and that's what I'm trying, because then it was then going to you guys, it was still always dumbbell presses with a neutral grip. But then when I went to like one public gym ever when I was still in high school, but then I was always surrounded by you guys. And I noticed once we started being around coaches that it wasn't the case that neutral grip is what people default to. So it's always pronated, right?
Yep.
Or it's like the pronated.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, I think it's more like the bodybuilding culture. Like they, when you bench press, you have the bar, so they think, well, if I'm doing it with dumbbells, I'll just use a pronated. But why we like to do it with neutral is because we use the bar so much. Why not take that opportunity to do dumbbells in a neutral grip and get that extra range of motion and use a different motor pattern?
People can also lift more weight with a pronated grip. So people always tend to choose exercises they can use more load.
Yeah. Because then whenever I see people do the pronated grip on top of it, it's normally with far less range, not even just because they're limited by it, but just because they're also just choosing to do less range. Okay. Moving on, you can say something else for bench press now.
Well, then afterwards, it would be a technique combined with an exercise modification, but it would be a closed grip bottom position inertia press. Yeah. That to me, I think is phenomenal to improve bench press strength. So closed grip, which is basically shoulder width. Mm-hmm. Not like not with the thumbs, thumb to thumb. That's way too narrow. So closed grip is like shoulder width or like biacromial, and the bottom position inertia press. This is you set up the safety pins like right at chest level, like half an inch, let's say 1 centimeter for the Europeans, right above your chest, and you start from that position. So now you have zero elastic energy, and then you need to focus on generating a lot of force real quick and keep on accelerating throughout your concentric with as much weight as possible. And you do, again, there's like a wide range of reps, but I'd say anywhere from 2 to 6 normally with that technique is effective. Lower down under control, pause on the pins for at least 2 seconds. Then bam, explode again. And make sure you use the X concentric tempo, which stands for intended maximal concentric acceleration. So you want to have the intent of accelerating the load as much as possible, irrespective of the velocity. Because, of course, if you're using like 80% and over, it's not like you're going to move the barbell that quick, but you want to try to move it that quick. If you do so, you'll target higher threshold motor units and you'll get stronger a little quicker. So that to me, it's great. It's a really cool plateau buster.
Yeah, Oric, your favorite for bench?
For all upper body presses, there's going to be a lot of similarities, and close grip variations of barbell is going to have a really good carryover to medium grip variations. You're going to have more tricep activation. You're going to go through a slightly longer range of motion. So that is going to be a very common theme here. But then depends. So if someone's really weak off the chest, dips are great. I know it's another primary movement, but it's great. But whereas if someone's struggling from like midpoint up, you've got your pin touch and inertia again. So it's very straightforward with upper body. There isn't as much
it's probably
variation.
A good thing because we're at 50 minutes, guys.
Okay.
Well,
and then all the different angles, right? All the angles above will help increase the strength of the angles below.
Yeah, but if we were trying to be, we're going to cover all the angles. We're trying to be as specific as possible for the bench press. Let's say you want to be as strong as possible in the upper body pushing movements, but somehow you can only do one exercise. Me, it would be a standing overhead press.
Yeah.
That to me, the stronger you get on the overhead, the stronger you'll get anywhere else. But although I agree with Porik that it all gets very similar and the closed grip variation works with everything, I think that two movements, which are the extremes that could have a little bit more specificity, would be the overhead and the dip. For me, for the standing, I'm not talking about the seated overhead, but the standing overhead, my favorite exercise to drive that up is, and we've done it not that long ago, and it's freaking brutal, the thick bar, close grip, Z press.
Yep.
I love the Z press.
That to me is brutal, because now you need to work the stabilizers of the trunk,
Yep.
which is required on a standing overhead press. You have the close grip, which makes it much harder because you have more range of motion to cover, you have more elbow extension to account for. And then the thick bar, it's not about the different motor unit pull recruitment, it has nothing to do with grip, nothing like that. I like the thick, like a 3-inch thick. I like the thick because it pushes the center of mass of the implement a little bit more forward than normal with the regular barbell. So now it forces you to be even stronger as you're transitioning across the face on your overhead press. So to me, it has a lot of bang for your buck.
And if you want to take it one step further, do it with a log.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Well,
Like,
guys,
it's already
our
far
3-inch
enough.
bar and our log is too heavy for me to do it.
That's true. But you could, like, the log would be very similar to the Swiss bar.
Yeah.
Because it still have to go further out in front than a 3-inch bar, but it's brutal.
Yeah, the lug is brutal.
Yeah. If you need to drive up the strength in your abs and hip flexors, this is also a great way because the stabilization required is crazy.
Yeah, in the Z press
Yeah,
even.
crampy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, 100% in
Yeah.
Z-press.
And then to me, for dip, the one that, and we saw it so clearly on you,
Oh, yeah. the
Kelsey went
suspended
from
push-ups.
Kelsey went from struggling on dip to a few phases of suspended push-up with rings to being able to blast dips like it was nothing.
Suspended push-ups with rings where you had me doing longer eccentrics, where you had me doing pauses, where, we played
slow
with that for a while.
concentric,
Yeah,
slow concentric.
Yeah.
But why is that good is because, well, it's unstable, but it allows you to work on stabilizing the scapula in space, which is also required in the dip.
Yeah.
And it allows you to go in a lot of shoulder extension, which is also required in the dip.
To me personally, it's one of those things where the suspended push-up with all those variations, you feel like you're doing a dip almost.
Yeah.
Like the vulnerability in the bottom position of the dip is, you feel that way more in those suspended push-up variations compared to just doing like decline presses or anything like that.
You're right. And the torso, it's tricky, right? Because the torso angle is not the same. But if you look at the stress of the shoulder joint in relation to the torso angle, then it resembles a lot more.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like it feels
like
it. Yeah.
And then, Alex, do you want to close the topic with your favorite for the chin up? I feel
Favorite for the chin up. I mean, I think it would be more of a technique, like when we're teaching someone the chin up, is to do the pause, the slow eccentric, the eccentric pauses as you go down.
Yeah, and then the third progression would be assisted. So the coach assists. So to me, it's that straightforward. The chin up is so funky that you need to do it.
Yeah.
I think it's important on the chin up where the assisted reps, because that was a big game changer when we went through that, in terms of what the assisted is, like telling the difference for the client of them pushing in versus
so that's it. Like there's different ways to spot it, but the way we like to spot it is really at the feet, so that the client has their knees bent 90 degrees and you're supporting their feet, and they can push into your hand. So one, it helps them activate their abs and stay tight, but then they can give themselves as much help that they need as we push them up.
Yeah. Versus a lot of people I find are almost like pushing
the
clients up versus the client being the one
to gauge
giving how much they need to complete the.
And we have the 3-step progression on our YouTube, don't we?
Yeah.
So it's all there. So it's eccentric. Step 1 is eccentric. Step 2, it's isometric. Then it's assisted with concentric. I will just say, though, that what's really important to understand with the chin up is body composition is important. Like if the client is too overweight, it's kind of like you probably need to revert to the pull down while they're losing a little bit of weight. And then sometimes you're going to notice that elbow flexor strength specifically is a limiting factor. So one thing that I like, especially if they struggle with the initial pull, like right from the hang, and they struggle, I love adding as your remedial some Scott curl with a neutral position to be super specific, because you'll start your chin with a neutral grip because you're a little stronger. So a neutral grip Scott curl, which strengthen the bicep at the elbow joint, especially at full extension. So from that full extension to that first 30 degrees, you get a lot of work there. So if you're able to strengthen this, it's going to help with that initial pull. So then you can use that momentum to drive more force all the way up.
We have a few more minutes if there's any other exercises for any specific upper body.
Well, one honorable mention would be a high incline, so 55 or 65 degree dumbbell press. So it'll have the best carryover, obviously, to an incline press, but I find it'll have carryover to all pressing. Since it's dumbbell, there's going to be an awful lot more stability involved, which lots of people do lack shoulder stability, so that really limits their ability to have a good bar path and have very similar reps, like from rep to rep. I think that really helps drive up your anterior delt, upper chest, and triceps, which can be lacking in a lot of people.
I think another very important factor to mention for all of this is, we're talking about all these different exercises, different techniques that we're going over. But in the end, the most important thing, and I know we're slowly trying to find our voice in terms of like really what we want to push with our followers and our students, but above everything else is, again, the quality of movement in everything you do. If you're focusing, no matter what you're focusing on, especially if you're focusing on developing strength, you need to master good exercise execution. Yeah, sure. And it's also, as a coach, truly figuring out what that is, because you need to lead by example. You need to train well. We post our training all the time to show everyone, look, we're doing it. We're doing it well. We're following all the parameters that are in our programs. But again, when we do our exercises, they're clean. We don't fail on technique. And if we do fail on technique, we're cutting off the set because we know that's when it needs to stop.
Yep. And there, that's it. Folks.
Like I just want to add a closing thought though. On any lift, on all the primary lift that we talked about, in my opinion, from what I've seen at least the last 10 years, you want to improve all of these lifts. Strive to be strong eccentrically. I think that people forgot about eccentrics. Yeah. A lot of people are extremely weak eccentrically. Make sure you spend some time building up eccentric strength, and this will help you drive everything else.
And when you're saying building up eccentric strength, this is one of my pet peeves, is the whole people saying now that tempo training is
eccentrics,
is eccentrics or whatever, but it's
not eccentric.
Yeah, that's not eccentrics. And when you're saying developing eccentric strength in one way, you're just saying training with eccentrics.
Yeah, I'm not like a 4-0-1-0 tempo is not eccentric training. That's a good base for eccentric control, but it does not train eccentric strength. And extended eccentrics is cool, but that's like step one. So at one point, you need to move on. You need to spend, if you've been training for a solid 2 years, you need to start accepting that you're going to have to spend time doing supra-maximal eccentric work to really pass your strength to the next level. Like, you're not going to get crazy strong by never doing this unless you do other stuff. But it's important.
Before that, learn how to count properly. You can do all the eccentrics you want, but if you're counting real quick, it's not eccentric.
But I've had my fair share of workouts where you feel like your tendons are gonna snap. That's the feeling you need to to go after.
Strive for your tendons.
Not what you should strive for.
Okay, so final countdown is now on. We have wrapped up all live education for this quarter at our facility. So we will be in Amsterdam on August 17th, and we will be in Lyon, France on August 24th. Alex and I booked our flights and our Airbnb last night. So we're ready. We're coming over, guys. We want to see all of you over there in Europe. So comprehensive periodization seminar, 1 day, $600. It is your opportunity to not fly overseas, to come learn from the Kilo crew. We will be there. We're super excited to host you. Join us, fam. We'll see you next time.
Young Buck.